This is going to be a fantastic show tonight. I have a returning guest who I think is a wonderful guy. Had a blast with him last time. I keep up with everything he does pretty much every day when I see him on Facebook and social media. Mr. Jason McLeod, the author, the extraordinaire, the event producer. Hello, how are you?
I'm good. It's actually Jason McLeod. I know it's not an easy one to pronounce, but that's okay.
McLeod?
McLeod. It's all right. Sometimes it gets messed up. That's the problem.
Well, let me start over. This is Jason McLeod. This is the man. So Jason, I'm sorry, I mispronounced your name. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I don't know why I did that. But anyway, we're going to keep moving forward. So you're an author of some amazing books, but there's so much more. I mean, like, you have been in this paranormal business, or, pretty much you're basically most of your life, really. I mean, it started in college, right? I mean,
it's actually started in high school.
Okay.
And I always believed in spirits. I was always in the libraries in middle school and high school, researching ghosts and mythology, which is based on fact. Most mythology is based on some fact. And I read The Demonologist by Gerard Brittle and Ed and Lorraine Warren when I was a senior in high school in Westport, Connecticut. And I was stunned. I couldn't believe, this incredible demoniacal activity that was taking place inside people's homes, and I was especially concerned for the children, because no child should have to experience these types of attacks inside their own home or in their own rooms. Your home is your place of solitude. And I was stunned, and I put the back on the shelf, and I knew the Warrens lived just a few miles away. In fact, in Monroe, Connecticut, I lived there for a portion of my life when I was a boy. And I knew it'd be easy to contact them and get a hold of them, but I just really didn't have the interest at that time. The timing just wasn't right. And for me, I knew that everything happened exactly as it was meant to be when it was meant to be. And that's a synchronicity that's happened throughout my entire life. And there was an amazing synchronicity that led me to meet the Warrens. But I've discussed that so many times on all these other shows. But then I got into near-death experience studies. Dr. Raymond Moody's Life After Life, for instance. And that intrigued me, because if you really want to understand spirit phenomena and what happens when we vacate the body, just read about near-death experiences, because they're all so very similar. And it's an amazing phenomena where people's conscious awareness vacate the physical body. They are looking down at their bodies on the operating table or in the car wreck. And they're seeing how awful they look, and many times they're mangled, or a woman will see her elderly, her old aged body on the table, and she'll go, "Oh my God, did I really look that bad?" But then they'll realize, hey, I'm still me. I'm still conscious, right? I can see and hear and make sense out of what I'm seeing and hearing, even though my body is, trapped beneath the water, under the weight of the waterfall, or smashed to bits in a car wreck, for instance. And they realize, I'm still very much alive. And, when you start to correlate that and cross-reference it to what human spirits or ghosts might be feeling, it's really easy to understand. So get a hold of these books. Then what's really interesting, and I was thinking about what we could talk about tonight, and as you were beginning, I said, "Oh, I could talk about this." So there was a woman who actually was a colleague of Dr. Moody's, Dr. Edith Fiore, and she was also a hypnotic regression therapist, psychologist, and psychiatrist, and she stumbled accidentally upon a phenomenon called human spirit cohabitation, where she actually put a subject under deep hypnotic trance, and realized she actually hypnotized the spirit of the discarnate spirit that was actually cohabitating this young man's body, that he picked up in a bar, and the spirit of an old man that was interfering with his life. And it opened up this entire field of study where she could actually help the victims of this human spirit cohabitation.
Wow. Okay.
The client actually often turned into the possessing spirit because they were lost and so very much um, unsure what to do with themselves. They all turn away
Right.
from the light. And again, this will get back into near-death experience studies. They all turn away from the light, and usually because they're afraid of facing judgment. That's a big one. Or they're afraid of facing loved ones that they don't want to deal with. They had an abusive father, for instance. I don't want to deal with him. Or they think that they can't get their addictions when they go and cross over into the spirit world. So they go to the bar, or they go to the gambling casino and they go to the places where they actually can try to fulfill their addictions, but they can't because they're not uh, animating or um, existing through a human physical form anymore. So they'll do the next best thing and move into the person who actually, and then they convince that person to go and partake in the uh, gambling or the drinking or the drugs or the sex or whatever it is they're addicted to, overriding the conscious thought of the original consciousness that was supposed to be living and experiencing this reality through their own body. And it's amazing. And she said that this really got me. And I was really thinking about this lately, thinking I kept having the book cover flash over and over in my mind.
Hmm.
I have it right there on the desk. And The Unquiet Dead by Dr. Edith Fiore, because I realized that, I made it my purpose to help discarnate human spirits cross over properly and to help families deal with lingering loved ones and also inhuman diabolical forces that are trying to destroy them. Because I was trained later as a demonologist under Ed Warren. And when I thought that, God, how amazing it would be to free somebody of possessing spirits, human spirits, not demonic, right? So religious provocation and praying and so forth will have no effect on them whatsoever. You're having a heart-to-heart conversation saying you're interfering with this young person's life, and they often don't realize the damage that they're doing. So they're convinced through a very compassionate conversation, hey, you can cross over and have all the things that you desire there. There's no limit, you know, and you can actually go on and come back, in a body of your own eventually. And they go most often. And this Edith Fiore said that most every person suffering from schizophrenia that's locked in an asylum can be relieved of that condition when the subject's put under hypnosis and the possessing spirits are removed. Absent any true mental psychosis, they can be freed, which is amazing. And the
Yeah.
people that are seeing things are untrained mediums, and they're getting glimpses of the lower astral plane and so forth. And to them, it's as real as can be. But to those who don't understand these things, they'll lock them away and claim that they're psychotic and their entire life is wasted because they're under control of possessing spirits, and there's no relief, there's no escape. So how wonderful it would be to help and save these people um, in these ways. And there are thousands of hypnotic regression therapists that are doing that, but you don't hear about it.
Yeah, this is fantastic, and I like what you said about the fact that there are different kinds. So we always kind of think that if they're possessing that person, because I mean I call them attachments or different things, and I know that they can jump on us, and be in us, and do everything that you just mentioned. But
Mhm.
I like what you said, that it's not always a possession. Like, it's not always a demonic possession. In fact, I'm learning now that there's less and less actual demonic than there's more obsession or oppression, things like that. So what would you call that? Would that just be, what would you call that when
This
they?
is called human spirit cohabitation. So there's two
Okay.
different types of possession. There's transient possession, where they temporarily move in and seize control. So if you look at your body like it's a spacesuit, right, hanging on a hanger in an airlock, right, in outer space, as an analogy, um, it's just an empty vessel, right? When their conscious awareness actually, of course, is using it, it's because it's their body to be used. but they're pushed aside temporarily because there's an overpowering consciousness that is seizing control of it. That's called transient possession. Now, I'm not sure if Bishop Long or Archbishop Enright or Archbishop McLeod or any other clergy that I have coming to my Defeating the Demonic event in October would clarify this situation, because obviously they're the authority in this. But Dr. Edith Fiore, in her work as a psychiatrist, calls it human spirit cohabitation. So they're vying for control, right? So your thoughts cannot be differentiated from the other's thoughts. So as an example, this young man turned 21. He went to the bar by himself and to celebrate and have a drink. And he had the thought to have an old timer's drink, something like his great grandfather would have had, right? And the bartender thought that was kind of strange, but he made it for him. I don't know what it was. And he had a few and he made it home safely. But he woke up in the morning stiff. His eyes were blurred. His back was killing him. He had different needs and wants and desires. He still lived at home. And his mother said that he asked for things for breakfast that he would never ask for. And he had an aversion to the things that he normally asked for. So she's like, who are you? What's going on here? And through the weeks, she actually decided that he needed to see a psychologist so they can get to the bottom of this. And they put him under. And when Dr. Edith Fiore put him under, she discovered that she also hypnotized the spirit of this old man that was lurking in the bar, that put the idea into his head in the first place. Get this kind of drink. It's what I want. It's what he's been craving, an old timer's drink. Right. So, and he was also influencing him, because he was changing his, the young man's thought patterns, and he couldn't differentiate his own thoughts. So think about that for a minute.
That's scary.
It is, right? So how do you know what your thoughts are compared to the thoughts of a spirit that you pick up? Everybody wants to go and check out these haunted, hotels and factories and asylums and theaters and all these places, not really knowing what they're bumping into.
Yeah.
Unless they can really unless they're really trained mediums or they're psychic and they can see. But you can pick up all kinds of things and go home and be completely changed. And it's fascinating and it is frightening. And the number of people that are cohabitated is probably quite large. And for instance, addictions, right? You want to quit smoking. You want to quit because it's bad for your health. It smells and it affects everybody around you, and it affects other people's opinions of you in many cases, right? If they don't smoke. But there's an intelligence inside you saying, I don't want to quit. Don't you dare. I'm not going to quit. So it's vying for control. But you get rid of that interloper, or that discarnate, as Fiore would call it. All of a sudden, you are the one in control and the only one in control. And then you have the willpower to quit smoking. Same thing with eating disorders and weight disorders and things like that. You may be cohabitated by the spirit of a very large individual whose residual memory about their own body is a very large body, and that can actually affect the thoughts of the original consciousness into engaging in a massive eating campaign, or their body just blows up, but when they're removed, all of a sudden they shrink and lose all the weight. That's another case study in Dr. Edith Fiore's book. It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I totally am in agreement with all of this. In fact, I believe that I had a Coca-Cola. I'd never really liked Coca-Cola or any of that. And then over the last, it's done with now, but I actually brought in Bill Bean on that one. I didn't tell him, but I wanted a clearing because I felt like there was something there that was creating me to not be able to stop that, which was affecting my health. So I did recently, it was like, I don't know. I mean, but you would think like somebody like me, well, I would be able to understand that. But to try to clear it, I felt like it was overpowering to me in a way still. And so, I mean, I'm admitting that right here, but yeah. So once I did that, it was gone, completely gone. And so I've even had at other times in my life where I was working with I'm a trained Ho'oponopono therapist too. So that is about working with my remote viewing and different things like that. Well, one time I went into my session with my trainer, with my person that taught me how to do that more or less. And she looked at me and she goes, "There's a spirit here going, cherry Coca, oh no, cherry Pepsi." She was singing a cherry Pepsi song. And that is really, I mean, if I say Coke, it's really cherry Pepsi. And that was several years ago. So that was in 2019 or 2020. And so it's like I don't know if that made, but then it went away and then it came back. But isn't that weird? She saw a spirit attached to me singing a cherry Pepsi song. So yeah, I'm totally with you, and I've never said it, so I don't know who's going to be watching this, but I've had several times where I think that, I think people like us, or people that are intuitive already, there's a lot that can happen to us if we're down, or like you're talking about, like when a person feels down or depressed, sometimes we're not at our best. Even a person that works with people and has a high frequency or whatever, but there are times in my life where I can get really down too. And so I think that's when we all have to be prepared, and I think this is great. So you're actually, when you do your events and different things, this is a big topic for you, right? This is part of your goal, is to help others with this
Absolutely.
subject. Yeah, talk a little bit about that, Jason, because you go and if people know you, that they see you at your events, and they're huge. I mean, you go to these events all the time, and you actually have to deal with that too, protecting yourself, because you're in the midst of all these people at these events. And just talk a little bit about that for us, okay?
So yeah, sure. I published my first debut novel, Dark Siege: A Connecticut Family's Nightmare, in 2012, thinking it would be an instant success because I worked with the Warrens, and everybody knows who the Warrens are if they're in the paranormal field, but that wasn't the case, and then I found out that there were these paranormal conventions going on. I'm like, paranormal conventions? So I looked into that, and I got my first table at Mid-South Paranormal. I believe it was in Kentucky, Louisville. And my very first convention, that's where I met Bishop James Long, and
Oh my
had a
goodness.
really interesting conversation with him, and gave him a copy of my book. And we became, good friends, and he became a huge supporter of my books from that moment, which was great. And that really helped, supercharge everything. So I started buying vendor tables at these conventions, and I found that there were just more and more and more and more of these, and there were some that were very large, some that were small. And since 2012, I started this and kept upgrading my table display and so forth, with the purpose of meeting people and explaining my reasons for writing the book, which is to warn kids. The family was never going to talk about this case, and most of the severe cases will never become public knowledge because these people are terrorized, right? And they're fearful of a return. And by giving it recognition in any way, you can draw these spirits back into your awareness and back into your life. And it's always 10 times worse. They came back a second time. That's why there's a second volume called Dark Siege 2: The Nightmare Returns, including incubus and succubus attacks, which are sexual. They really went full blast on this family. And I had to release that as a second volume, and because it would have been an 800-page book. So I had to divide them up into two volumes. And it was Bishop Long that actually convinced me to release volume 2, including the incubus and succubus attacks, because I write like you're right there experiencing everything alongside everybody, and who wants to experience a demonic rape? So, but he convinced me, he said, you have to release this because people need to know how serious this is, though rare, but they need to seek help from clergy immediately. So I kept making all these connections and meeting all these amazing people, and all these people that had made it to celeb status because they somehow landed a TV show, but all the while thinking, I've worked with the pioneers of this entire field, at least in
Right.
North America, and Lorraine Warren, and most nobody has that experience. So I felt that I have a story to tell, and I have many stories to tell. But I'll start with recreating the case that I call Dark Siege: A Connecticut Family's Nightmare. And I did something completely different with it. For those who are interested in learning more, is that I recreated it in a cinematic Stephen King-esque horror fiction format. So it's like you're reading a fiction book. I wrote myself in as myself midway, because the first half of the entire story happened before I ever got involved. So I had to, did intense interviews with everybody, and the whole purpose, the reason they were willing to come forward in 2012 after so many years had passed without a third return is they made me make sure that I changed the personalities or the characters or the likenesses enough that they didn't come back and affect them a third time, which would have been unbelievably terrible. And it hasn't happened, thank God. But I promised I would do all that I could to make sure that these forces didn't come back after them. But I released it in a fiction format, and then I included a 100-page chapter analysis at the end explaining my experiences growing up, the whole synchronicity behind meeting the Warrens, including the details about my very first cases working for the Warrens and alongside them, which gives the reader some insight into my life and who I am as the author presenting the material. And then getting into my understanding about the science and spirituality behind the paranormal, what the family involved did right and wrong every step of the way, why ghost activity happens to some people and not others, how we invite these spirits into our lives, especially the demonic spirits, through invocation, evocation, Ouija board use, seances, and outright satanic practices and necromancy and things like that. And then more importantly, how to protect yourself, how to pray for protection more effectively, how to raise the vibration of your living spaces, how to perform sufumigation or suffumigation, which is my specialty, using high church incense, blessed holy candles, and prayer and holy water to raise the vibration of the living space and clear it of negative energies, right? It's all about frequency and vibration, and everything's frequency and vibration. And so year after year, show after show, I built my audience. I have over 400 reviews on Amazon, even though I've sold probably over 10,000 copies, including digital and paperback and things. And now I did the audiobook over the winter in my own voice, which is really great. I have an outstanding graphic novel version coming out with my help from my friend Corinne in Australia. And it's beautiful. So I'm just really expanding and trying to do all that I can to bring this phenomenal case to public awareness. But I'm on the road. I have the next 5 weeks. I just completed Contropolis in New Jersey. So that was a comic convention. I'm going to Nashville for Nashville Horror Con, then to Motor City Nightmares in Detroit, then to Knoxville for CreepyCon, then to Houston for Houston Horror Film Festival, and then in Chicago for Fan Expo. So I'm doing the zigzags, and I have no control over it because that's where these things are located. And I'm going to be putting probably who knows how many miles on my car and how many hours on the road over the next 5 weeks to do this. But again, the purpose is to meet people at my table, to inform them about this case, to help them understand it. And Mercedes, the number of women that come up to my table and tell me, with their kids, many cases, tell me how their kids see spirits, right? Or they're experiencing this phenomena, and so forth, is incredible. And I tell them, your child has a gift, and they can help these spirits cross over. The thing that really gets me to this day is, like, I would make stops at some of these locations, like haunted such and such hotel, and my purpose is to help them cross over. And they're like, don't cross my spirits, right? And I'm like, they're not your spirits. That's soul trafficking. How about we clear them out, so they can go on with their lives and free them of the stagnation that they're experiencing. And they get all bent out of shape. So you're going to ruin my business. And so it's crazy. It's not about money. It's about helping people, and, so it's a long, grueling road, especially as I'm getting older. But it's worth it, to help one person at one show, is worth it. But it's, I do well at the shows most often, especially the horror shows. But, a lot of the people at the horror conventions are horrific themselves. And it's funny is some of the people at these horror shows will walk by the table and I'll say, are you ready to be scared out of your mind? Or like, oh, no, I don't like being scared. It's like, you're at a horror convention. You know what I mean?
I know.
So.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What a life you have. I mean, and I got to say that when I heard about Ed and Lorraine Warren connection, I was like blown away because I actually just love them. I read that book, The Demonology, so
Mm-hmm.
and I just and I really gravitate toward the way she saw things because I see things like that. Those movies really got to me when they came out, The Conjuring, because I'm like, I mean, I don't want to go on about it, but yeah, so I totally relate to that. So the fact that you are who you are and that was a part of your life, yes, I think that is so amazing. And I feel like what a what a fortunate person to be one of the people that was connected with them and they really trained you and cared about you. I mean, how awesome to be that guy.
It's amazing when I think about it, and I'll tell everybody really, really quickly how that happened. I read The Demonologist, I put it back on the shelf. 4 years later, I was in the car with my friend who was a former Army combat medic and a current paramedic in Norwalk. At the time, we were listening to the radio. It was about the Warrens. I turned to him and I said, that'd be so cool to work with them. And he said, yeah, no kidding. And the next night he called me and says, you aren't going to believe who just called me. Who? Ed Warren. I'm like, what? Well, Ed was having heart issues, right? So he called the chief of EMS for a medic referral for their team. And the chief of the EMS gave Ed Lou's phone number, and he called Lou and invited them to their Monday night class because they taught a class, the Warren School of Paranormalology, in their home, in the museum, lower level. And I said, you have to get me in there. It's time. Right. So I attribute that to the universal law of intention. That'd be so cool to work with them. Right. And the universal law of conscious manifestation. Yeah, no kidding. And it was like the universe putting it together. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a synchronicity. So he told Lorraine all about the synchronicity. And she said, okay, invite Jason next Monday. So I got to go. And I tell you, it was like, parking on their cul-de-sac, right, on Knollwood Road in Monroe, and walking down their driveway into the back, seeing this building with the plaque, the Warren School of Paranormalology and the New England Society for Psychic Research, and going up to the door, and having somebody open the door. This was my friend, Drew Thompson. He's a friend of mine to this day. He's a very talented psychic in his own right. And he was one of the Warren's, researchers. And he opened the door and I saw Lorraine in the distance. She's tall and with her big bun, and she literally comes gliding right up to me. Hi, Jason, I'm Lorraine Warren, honey. Right. And she scrutinized me, right. Just like looked like right through me. How strong is your faith, honey? And I said, I have immense faith. I believe that I and the Father are one, as are we all, right? We all are. And she nodded and she asked, why do you want to get involved in work of this nature? And to her, it was always of this nature, meaning, spirit phenomena, ghost hunting and things like that. And I explained, I read The Demonologist, and, I wanted to help people, especially the kids. She said, so it's a calling then? She asked me, and I said, I believe so. Well, welcome aboard. And she invited me in, and we sat, there's probably a good 5 rows of chairs, probably enough for 20 people. And we sat there, and Ed comes up in his flannel shirt and, has the movie screen pulled down and starts talking to everybody and explaining the cases that are taking place and what evidence the investigators discovered and what the plan of action is. And they talked about a new case that came to their attention. And the mind-blowing thing to me that still blows me away to this day is they assigned Lou and I to that case, representing them the next evening alone. I was like, what? Right? Just Lou and I, right? And this was Lou's second class and my first class. So that changed my life. It blew me away, and it scared Lou about 50% out the door because he just couldn't deal with unseen phenomena. He could deal with the horrors of physical, medical trauma, but dealing with the unseen was something that he just couldn't quite cope with. But to me, I was hooked, hook, line, and sinker. I was like, this was so amazing to me. And I remember my sister-in-law came over one night to our house in Westport and asked what I was doing on the weekend, thinking, I was going out on a date, and I said, I'm going on a case, an investigation with the Warrens. She's like, that's not normal. That's not normal. You should be out on a date. It's like, I'm unlocking the secrets of the universe. The date can wait, or maybe I could meet somebody and take them on the date, but it was a passion of mine from the very beginning, since I'd studied it, as a very young boy, studying ghost phenomena and the histories of spirits and so forth. And it's all meant to be. And everything that's happened in my life has been completely synchronous in that regard.
Well, I've watched you on the Vimeo, and could you talk about that? Because that's available for everybody to watch?
Vimeo, gosh, I haven't even. The thing is, Mercedes, I need staff. There's only so much that I could do. You know what I mean? I'm booking the shows, I'm packing my car, I'm ordering merchandise, I'm doing the graphics, I'm getting in my car, I'm posting on Facebook, I'm going to the events, unloading my car, setting up my table, dealing with everybody, exhausted at the end of the night because you're there for 12, 15 hours sometimes. Getting some food, hopefully with somebody that I met, or somebody that I already knew, or just by myself, often by myself. It's very lonely. And but good Lord. So Devin Bellinger from Mysterious World TV, she read my book on a transatlantic flight. I met her in Scarefest in 2014. And she read my book, and she's just been hell-bent on getting this documentary made, but she's got so much going on herself. So eventually she came out last year, and we filmed footage at Union Cemetery where the case began and all the different locations. And she made I'd flown out to Arizona before COVID to be interviewed by her and about my chapter analysis section, chapter 1, which is about my experience getting involved in this field and working with the Warrens, and the most amazing case of my early career, which happened in Vermont. And I had actually gotten a copy of the audio from that case. So she helped me put this great video together called Dark Siege. I don't know what it's called, the chapter analysis. I believe it's on Vimeo. I'll have to find it. But we put it up there, expecting thousands and thousands of people to download it, because it's cheap. It's like $3.99 or $4.99. It's like ridiculous how inexpensive it is, considering all the work that was put into it, just so they can understand and be a part of this experience of mine and see and hear these voices and so forth. And the most intense aspects of the epic part about this whole 1 hour video is the case where we were involved in the case in Vermont, and there's the audio where Ed and Lorraine are clearly heard. Everybody's freaking out because of what's going on in the house. The table's bouncing all over the floor. One investigator is screaming, "It's coming, it's coming." And I had my first overpowering empathic experience where I'm literally bawling my eyes out, going, "Lorraine, this sadness." It was amazing. And that changed my life because, again, I wanted to be clairvoyant, right? Because Lorraine said, the more you're involved in cases of this nature, the more your sensitivities will increase, and we'll see what those become, because we're all sensitives, but we don't devote any time to enhancing those sensitivities. So I ended up being empathic. I literally picked up the emotions of this discarnate human spirit. In this case, it was a woman named Priscilla who lost her baby in an accident as she was being rushed to the midwife to deliver the baby. In such incredible, overpowering grief, I could imagine it because I felt it, but I literally was overcome by that and bawled my eyes out several times because I was picking up the all-consuming grief and sorrow that this woman felt. And that changed my life, because it would have been cool to see a ghost, and see an apparition, but to experience their pain, right, and their emotions really, really changed me. And again, it fueled my desire to help these spirits cross over and to help families deal with them in a compassionate way. If it's an earthbound human spirit, they need to be dealt with and talked to in a compassionate way, because they're just like you or I, minus the body, and in many cases in great despair. And again, now I have to believe, and I do, that all of this has been orchestrated, that I'd be most effective as an empath and not as a clairvoyant. I would like to see, in addition to having that empathy, just so I can see what's around me and try to engage them without, being oblivious to them. But it's a fascinating thing to do what I do, and I'm blessed for it. And I'm thankful and grateful for every, opportunity that I had, and to be able to have worked alongside and for and with both Ed and Lorraine when they're in their prime is a unique and amazing thing. And I'm certainly not the only one. There were dozens of people that I know that have worked in some capacity for them, whether they're photographers or investigators or people handling, reports and things like that. But Lorraine was a sweetheart, and she cared deeply for the safety of her investigators. And she would call investigations off completely or stop them short when she felt that anybody was in danger. And she always made sure, she says, no drugs, no alcohol, be well rested, right? You have to be sound physically, mentally, emotionally, and especially spiritually. How strong is your faith? Was the very first question she asked me. Not, do you work out? How strong is your spiritual defense? Because these cases, they didn't get involved in the small cases. They got involved in the big ones and put themselves, and in many cases the investigators that are helping them, in great danger.
I watched the movie The Hour. I thought it was fantastic. So for
Thank you.
people that are listening, I mean, it's really great. It's very well done. To hear the audio that you're talking about is just like spine chilling or spine tingling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and it was.
You can find that at my website nowadays. Remember, www.darksiege.com, darksiege.com. Scroll down and you'll see the poster that Devin made, Dark Siege Chapter Analysis, and just click on the poster. It'll take you to the Vimeo, and it's like a $4 or $5 rental for an hour. You'll never hear anything like this anywhere else, as far as I'm concerned. And it's great insight. It's really, really powerful information. And there's other things on there on my website too. You can find my newspaper articles that I wrote for the Sacred Heart University Spectrum newspaper. I wrote a column called Hauntings there about my very first case that the Warren sent me on, and others. And then I picked that same newspaper column up at Eastern Washington State University when I transferred out there for my creative writing degree, because they learned that I was the author of the column in Connecticut. So I picked that up. So you can find those actual copies, which is really cool, because that's way back in 1990, back in the Stone Age. It's amazing how many years have gone by. And but you can find all kinds of stuff. I take lots of photos at the conventions and really ham it up a lot, because you have to have fun too, so people can get a load of that. I have a TikTok channel. What's funny, Mercedes, is I don't even use it. You know what I mean? It's like I said, I need a social media empire to do everything that I need to have done. And it's hard to be a one-man show,
I mean, like, I have all that too, Jason, and I mean, just the fact trying to get it all done. Yeah. So you know what? But I have a feeling someday that will happen. Like where you are, because I could really see, especially seeing that visual in the video or the film. I could see where your work should actually be more, where people can visually see it.
Yeah, more mainstream.
Yeah, and I believe that's the goal. And so as long as you keep focusing and keep going, in which you are, then that's the way. I mean, look, after what happened to us, and I just kept with it, making that filming and just everything to keep. And it's happening for me, like it's like if it's supposed to be, it's going to be. So
absolutely, and timing is everything. So
yeah, and so I really think that is, in the future, that there's ways to create these things to where visually it can happen, and but the story is horrifying. It reminds me of, remember that I can't, what's the call of it? It was a really scary story, true story, and it was on TV, also in a movie. It was that lady, and she was raped in the show, and they had a team out there. And do you remember what I'm talking about? It was like a one-word show. I should have known this by now, but I don't remember it. But I'll never forget it because it was so frightening. and I believe it was actually even put on TV, probably watered down slightly. But the team came in and they investigated her, and then they did the paranormal stuff, and it was horrifying. So what happened in the Dark Siege, different layers of that, it is horrifying what happened to that family. I'm glad you were able to bring it out to share with me.
Yeah, I was honestly, I never expected it to even occur. When I found in 2012 that there were all these paranormal teams out there, with their T-shirts and baseball hats and sunglasses, and in many cases the bulging biceps, and I was like, all these paranormal groups out there, XYZ paranormal, I won't mention any names. There's like, and then I found out that there are all these groups, many of them using Ouija boards or conducting seances inside people's homes when they're claiming to be there to help. And I called John Zaffis because I worked with John with the Warren's nephew, and I told him what's going on. He's like, it's an epidemic, and I called the woman who's the principal in this case, and I told her what's going on. And she says, my God, if you could spare one family from the nightmare that we went through, especially a little girl like Kelly, right? Then just change our likenesses and make sure nothing comes after us a third time. Because they were absolutely devastated after the first part of the case, and then they came right back after them 33 days later. That's a number, right? But that's why I did what I did.
7 times 7, like if it leaves, it comes back and brings more with it.
It's always worse, much, much worse, right? So it never would have come to be because, I respected their privacy and they did not want the story told. And I especially didn't want them to get harmed in any way afterwards. So they've never read the book. They've never once looked at a podcast. They have no interest in anything paranormal, right? And they were warned that to steer clear of all that stuff. I believe that Kyle, one of the 16-year-olds that was involved in the incubus attack, went to seminary, and because he was so devastated by what happened to him. And I mean, how can you recover from an attack by a demonic spirit that hates you with every fiber of its existence and violates you in the most unbelievable way? How can you ever have a normal life after that? And thank God that nothing has come after them again. And most of these cases, nobody will ever learn about these extreme cases. When you look at, I'll give you an example, the Smurl family in the book, The Haunted, that was also turned into a movie. They regretted going public, but because they wanted to warn people, right? But the ridicule that they faced from their neighbors, people driving by at all hours of the night, just teasing them and jabbing them and treating them in such horrible ways, on top of the way that they had to endure the attacks from the inhuman spirits, the humans were even worse in many regards. So, people don't want all of the money in the world is not worth the attacks that take place. All, getting fame and fortune at the expense of losing your life, or being completely debilitated and choked and be battered and burned and raped, and possessed, none of that is worth it. And
right.
There's so many cases that I've investigated, with the Warrens, on the Warrens' behalf, on my own, in all throughout New England and in the West Coast, Washington and Idaho areas. The families don't want to go public, and it's like, it's such captivating information. Bill Bean and I investigated a case recently together up in upstate New York, and I believe they would be willing to come forward and have us read. But again, how do I have the time? I have 2 books in the works right now: Rage and Rathdrum, which is the case that the Warrens sent me on in Idaho because I was closer geographically, and also a case that I was involved, the case that would happen in Vermont. I'm writing a full-length novel about that because that's my talent, and I have the ability to recreate in a very visual way the cases that were investigated from everybody's perspective. That really helps you feel like you're right there. You're feeling the emotions that everybody's feeling together and separately. It's just it's a talent that I have, and I'm again, it's all meant to be, right? And I'm thankful and I praise God for the ability to be able to convey recreate these cases and present them in a novel format.
Well, that's your
Because it's
empathy.
effective.
That's your empathic ability.
Yeah.
Because you're able to tune in. Like literally everything happens. Like you can literally go right back into time. Your emotions like can go right there. You can visually be where you were, and so you probably, I feel like you have that ability to where you can literally kind of go back into the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're tuned in that much, and I think that's your gift. Do you ever feel that way? Like it's
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And it's a knowing, like Bill Bean calls it a knowing of things, and he's grateful for it, But I can recreate things through the written word that really is effective. And the most common comments with my books, everybody tells me it's the most common comment on Amazon and Goodreads is I could not put this book down, but I couldn't read it at night without all the lights on because I was completely terrified, but I wanted to know more. Bishop Long read Dark Siege 2 cover to cover. He could not put it down. He had to go walk his dogs. He had to eat, but he's like, he could not wait to get back and pick it up. I sent him the PDF before I self-published it. And especially because I said, I'm really hesitant to include the incubus and succubus portions because they're devastating, and it happened to, minors. And, but he read it, and he's the one that encouraged me to release it, to warn people. So you have to know that should these things happen, you have to seek help from clergy immediately. Do not wait, because it's the most despicable violation there can be, And but he's been a huge supporter of mine, and he's always talking about my books and plugging them. He made my books required reading for his demonology course, which is really great.
Wow.
And because it's a modern thing. It's like you said, these, I have primary research, which means I've been there. A lot of books out there are written by people who have had secondary research, which means they're reading books by those who had primary experience and then writing their own books based on what they learned, a video or YouTube that they watched and so forth. And he said they're just terrible. He says, read Jason's books because they're quality, and he's read them and he endorses them, which is really good. So again, I'm grateful for all of that.
It would be so great to have both of you on together.
Let's do it. I'd love to be on with Bishop Long. He's an amazing guy.
And I've reached out to him, but he is so busy.
He is.
And on Tuesday, there was something that, it's like every day. So I kind of like, well, okay, but maybe there would be a way, maybe Spirit or God will put it together because, I really believe it's important. And so, yeah, maybe we could do that. I would love that.
I would too.
Can you talk a little bit about the Defeating the Demonic that's coming up in October? Because that's, this is number 2. This is second time.
Second one, yeah. It's amazing how time has flown by. So last year, I decided I was guided to put together an amazing, I called it an extreme immersion event because you're right there sitting in the audience listening to archbishops and bishops and deliverance ministers who are all exorcists revealing their most harrowing cases and explaining, myself included, explaining how these forces weave their way into our lives, how they, the different phases of the attacks from infestation to oppression and obsession to possession, transient or perfect possession, and then exorcism, and what these men have to do to save these people or deliver them from evil, right, and evil spirits. And the dangers involved in being a paranormal investigator and sticking your nose into places where you shouldn't be, right? And how they have to be the last line of defense to really, resolve these situations. So I put on an amazing event last summer in July in Southbury, Connecticut at the Heritage Hotel. I had Archbishop McLeod, who's a mental health professional from North Dakota, who's also one of Archbishop Ronald File Enright's people under his. He runs an organization, amazing man, love him. He made an amazing. I organized something called the Order of Saint Michael the Archangel, where he has literally over 1,000 exorcists in his jurisdictions all over the world, to combat evil, right? In this battle between the forces of good and evil. So I had him. I said he was the first person I chose. Bishop James Long, who's been a huge proponent of my books, and Bill Bean, a powerhouse of a man and a deliverance minister who is just amazing to be around. His energy and his faith and his strength and courage and the ability to convey what these men convey in public is just amazing. So I put it together. It was a big success. I had it live streamed. You can find that also on my website by just scrolling down and clicking on the poster. I had a live stream.
Right.
I have a rebroadcast that you can listen to. But anyway, I have an epic Defeating the Demonic event taking place this October 20th in Bridgeport, Connecticut at the Bijou Theater, which is actually the oldest. It's been restored, but it's the oldest live entertainment venue in the country. In Bridgeport, Connecticut, perfect location. It's a nice area. Parking garage right across the street. Free Sunday parking for those who are concerned about cutting expenses. It's an 8-hour immersion event it's going to be starting at 9:30 in the morning. The poster says 1 p.m. currently, but that's all being changed because I decided I'm going to make it an epic 8-hour event instead of a 4-hour event like it was last time, because there's so much information to convey. I'm bringing in other guest speakers. I'm bringing in you, right, Mercedes, because you run and writes
the podcast.
Well, but you run the caseload information, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that type of stuff, and others. I'm bringing in other people. I'm bringing in people who are defeating the demonic, right? It's just an interesting name. It's like how do you create a name that encompasses all of this stuff? The ultimate goal is to defeat the demonic, right? So I call it Defeating the Demonic.
Yeah.
And there's general admission tickets. There's table seating. They always go first. So if you're on the fence, grab the table seating. There's concessions. There's all kinds of great stuff. There's going to be a VIP dinner afterwards for 2.5 hours right across the street for an extra ticket price, but it's 2.5 hours with all the presenters. I have other presenters coming in. I just haven't been finalized yet, but I hope to have a good maybe 8 or 9 or 10 or 12, including myself. And it's going to be something. It's going to be unlike anything you've ever seen, and it's going to be twice as big as it was last year. My ultimate goal is to take this on the road and have primary speakers and then fill-ins, depending on the region that we're in, that can just jump on and contribute. But again, the goal is to expose the darkness, and they don't like that very much, right? So they always try to throw wrenches in the works and so forth. But to expose the darkness, expose the methods that they employ to intervene in our lives and to try to destroy them, how to stand against them, how to pray properly. All these men will be able to pray over anybody who asks for a prayer. We pray over the audience. They pray over the audience before we begin and afterwards and so forth. And it's just a great way to connect with spiritual warriors, right? And that's one of the Bill Bean's tags, is the spiritual warrior. And he is, man. We should have Bill and I on a show with you too. Because,
I would love that. He's been on before.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I would love to have him back. He's got that new book coming out too.
Yeah, I don't know how he has time to write books like he does, but I mean, it's like, but he doesn't do all the conventions because he just doesn't do that anymore because he does what he does. But all these men are amazing, and if you want to truly learn from the experts in the field, this panel of people is just going to be incredible.
And that's so true because Archbishop Ron Enright, what I think is amazing is he really reaches out to the paranormal groups. I mean, because I see it all the time because I'm always on the email or doing that, and people are responding all the time for training. I mean, real training, not just little bits of training. I mean, these are real people doing this. He's been doing this like over 40 years. We have one of them on the show, Reverend Glenn. He's been doing this like 60 years. I love Reverend Glenn and Reverend and Bishop Joshua. So because of your defeating the demonic last year, I loved that so much, and I didn't get to go, but I wanted to go so bad, and I looked at everybody, and I I was, and so for the thing that it all ended up where I know most of the people you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and then it brought me closer to find to want to speak to you, and I really feel like you guys are doing something in this world. You're helping. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
God.
I mean, and I
Yeah.
think this event you're putting on is incredible. And I hope that people will, put aside whatever fears or whatever thoughts they have, and open their mind. This is not a movie, this is real life.
Yeah.
And people like you are bringing the real people like me. That's my deal. I want to bring the truth. I want to show that God can be victorious. God can save our lives. And I believe that everyone that you're talking about in this event is a huge process to stepping forward into that, where we could save a lot more people or help a lot more people. Jason, thank
Yeah.
you.
Defeat the demonic, like in Bishop
Defeat
Enright runs the unseen realm, right? Or it's
the realm.
so that for people to understand this better, the human eyes can only see visible light, which is 1% of everything around us. And if we
Yeah,
say, well, if I can't see it, it doesn't exist, doesn't make any sense, right? Because we're blind in these bodies. When you vacate the body, when you have a near-death experience, you'll see colors, you'll hear sounds, you'll see shapes, you'll interact with beings, you'll have an awareness that is 100 times more open than you have when you're inside the body. And that's why
right,
people don't fear death when they have a near-death experience. It's just, this is incredible, you know. I don't
right.
fear death. None of these people that have near-death experiences have any fear of dying whatsoever, because they know there's no such thing. You
Yeah,
vacate the limited vessel or the body or the avatar or the spacesuit and you're free. It's amazing. So, but because we can't see these spirits, you can't really say, oh, well, nothing happened when I used the Ouija board. If you can't perceive it and you're not
yeah,
psychic, you're not empathic, you're not sensitive, and you can't understand what you've actually done through inviting these forces into your life,
yeah.
which can come whenever they so choose, not right
Okay.
then. Uh, you really don't understand it. So this is all about, like Bill Bean says, knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. I can't remember. He has a great thing. Power perceived is power achieved, he said. He's great. I
Yes.
love Bill. Bill, I love you if you're watching this. He probably doesn't have time, but
No, but
he's amazing.
I'm there every Friday with him on his show. So
Oh, good.
yeah, I moderate. So I've been doing that over 3 years now.
Wow.
Since he saved us, since he
Yeah.
saved my life, I try to do that, give him that back.
Yeah.
So yeah, and so the unseen realm, that I hope that sometime, I don't know. I mean, I'm not in charge of that. I'm just part of it, but boy, it'd be great to have you on too. Sometime. Maybe that would work out. I know you were on the very first episode because I was on that one, so it's weird how it's evolved. But one thing that you were talking about a minute ago, how people don't realize it. But I can tell you that when I started to do that work with him, taking all the emails from all the people that I mean, like, it really put it in reality for me. How many people, and you probably get this too, do people reach out to you because they reach out to the the exorcist, his organization, they reach out to that,
Right.
um, the Order of Exorcists, and like on a daily, and from all over the world. These people are dealing with these things from all over the world, and I'm like,
And it's increasing exponentially.
oh my gosh. And so, it's really important, like this whole connection to go, from different parts of our country, but also different parts around the world. So what you're doing is you're creating the bridge by doing this, because the more people will hear that from other parts of the world, and that the message will get out and more people will get help.
One of my
So,
strengths is definitely bringing people together, and it's amazing how these things happen. For instance, a friend of mine in Australia, they're dealing with a very, very nasty case of voodoo. And at Parasite Con in Ohio, my friend Greg Nicholas, he's a psychic, good friend of mine, he said, I want to introduce you to this woman. Well, this woman knew a woman. She knew how to deal with voodoo, but this case ended up being Santeria. And this
yeah,
other woman that she knew is an expert at that. And she is actually now resolving this case in Australia that they were desperate because they thought it was a lost cause and things were really, really rapidly deteriorating. So for some reason, I act as a conduit or a bridge between people and somehow bring people together, and if that is in service to humanity, then that's a wonderful thing. And I'm happy to do that. And, like I told Corinne, I said, I don't need to be in the spotlight about this case. I brought the person, I met the person through another person who knew another person who was able to basically help you. And I don't need any accolades from that. And just do it. It's not about me. It's never about us. It's about being warriors, spiritual warriors, and helping to defeat the darkness. That's all we can do.
Yeah. Thank you. You're so
Thank
great.
you.
This was a really great, more serious show this time with you. Last time I think I laughed a lot throughout it, but you taught us a lot about you taught people a lot about different things, like how to clear their house or different things. So if people want to, they can go back and re-find that other show that he was on, and it was really great. I know we had a lot of comments about that, so that was really great. And I will look forward to having you come back again, and hopefully we can get you with Bill, and we'll get you with Bishop Long. It was Bishop Long, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll get, because there's so many of them now.
I know. I know.
There's all these bishops. But yeah, so we can have you come back and hopefully get that, but do that before the event in October. But I know you're going to be super busy with all this traveling, but we'll see what we can do. And thank you so much for being here. Can you tell us a little bit, like, how can they find you? Just kind of the ending.
Sure.
Yeah.
So darksiege.com. It's very easy. www.darksiege.com. It's the title of my first book. Has everything you need to know, right? You can just scroll down. Just keep scrolling, right? Just scroll down and down and down, because I have different graphics, for instance. So the Defeating the Demonic graphic, just click that. It'll take you directly to the Eventbrite page. There's limited seating. There's only about, I think, 100 seats in this theater. So if you're of any inkling of going, I'd grab a seat. And again, there's general seating and there's table seating, a VIP and a mezzanine. But Defeating the Demonic is available through darksiege.com. The theater is the Bijou, Bijou Theater in Bridgeport. It's beautiful. You can make hotel arrangements, fly into Bradley and Hartford. If you have to fly in, it's easier than New York. And you'll just access all kinds of things on my website, from the Vimeo, from the video that we made through Mysterious World TV, graphic novel information, my books, of course. You can order my books. I sign and personalize them and mail them out next day when possible. If I get orders on the road, I can fulfill them just by going to a post office on my travels and everything. But my books are where it's at. If you really want to understand this amazing case and my understanding of the science and spirituality behind the paranormal, then Dark Siege: A Connecticut Family's Nightmare is definitely the one to pick up. The sequel, Dark Siege: The Nightmare Returns, is the second half of the case and the most intense aspect. My third book is Our Journey Home, the Handbook for the Transition, which is a beautiful large print, color illustrated guide for everybody in hospice, their caregivers, for everybody to understand there's nothing to fear leaving the body. It talks about the process, that takes place when we do vacate the body intermittently, as the body is finally declining enough to the point where it dies, and then afterwards. And I have other books in the works, but I'm doing conventions all over the country. And I hope to see you at some of the conventions, but the Defeating the Demonic event is going to blow you away.
Oh, I'm so excited to be there going. I can't believe that. And it's going to be beautiful in that area. And you know what? Monroe is only like 15 minutes away.
I know. I should really try to plan some kind of tour or something. But again, it's all just me. It's just Jason McLeod handling all this stuff. So, eventually,
amazing.
Thank you.
You're
amazing too. And your history is amazing. And I heard all about that, on our podcast that we did. But look forward to seeing you. And let's try to get some more podcasts going. That was fun.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We got to get this out. We got to get you out more time. I'll help you. I'm good at this stuff. All right.
Good. All right.
Everybody, thank you so much. And God bless everybody. And be sure to look all this up. And I guess we're ready to take this show out. Not take it out, but say goodbye.
Have a good night,
Till
everybody.
next time.
Thank you.